She turned to face me, blushing slightly, but answered without hesitation. I wouldn't call it a novel, darling. I was shocked by her confession and waited silently for her to explain why having sex with another man didn't count as an affair. You're a wonderful person, Alex. You're a great provider and my best friend, but there are things you can't provide for me, and I'm not ashamed to say I want all of it, she said bluntly and openly. So, you're cheating on me, I said, discouraged by her brazen approach to infidelity. Only my body, she said, not my heart or my mind, Al, which belong to you. My head was spinning, and my stomach was knotted. The sheer audacity of her words made me speechless. I've never turned you down for sex, Alex, and all I do is explore with a couple of young guys, she admitted.
It's been a decade since my last job interview, but here I am at 44, determined to pursue my passion. I'm Alex Price, a mechanical design engineer. Despite being new to the area, I've decided to embrace this opportunity, even if it means joining a former competitor. I'm confident they'll recognize the value I bring to the table. Hopefully, everything will fall into place according to my plan. Speaking of which, my plan involves dealing with my unfaithful wife. I met Holly back in 1993, and her image still lingers in my mind. She was beautiful and self-assured, while I was reserved and shy, likely a result of being raised by an overbearing mother. Adding insult to injury, her sisters, Megan and Anna, tormented me throughout my childhood. Megan, the eldest, was 13 years my senior, while Anna was a decade older. I was deemed an unplanned mistake, blamed for my parents' separation, and left fatherless since the age of 5, until recent revelations shed light on the truth. Please, come in, Mr. Price. It's a pleasure to meet you, Robert Williams, the owner of Sutton Hydraulics, exuded warmth, a stark contrast to the man I'm leaving behind. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Williams, I reciprocated, settling into his imposing office as he took his seat opposite me. I must admit, I'm surprised you're parting ways with Walker Engineering, Mr. Price. Alex is fine, and honestly, I'm eager for a change, I responded. They've been doing well over there, Mr. Williams. Please, call me Robert, he interjected, his expression still puzzled. As I was saying, Robert, I've dedicated the past decade to driving advancements at Walker Engineering, yet received minimal acknowledgement and lately, no respect, I stated firmly, without disclosing my personal predicament, at least not yet. There's no doubt I want you here, Alex. I can offer you the package you asked for, which amounts to a raise of several thousand. But you also said on the phone that if you could help us win a few more contracts, you'd like a commission. Is that correct? He furrowed his eyebrows. Yes, I hope it's not something illegal, Alex. I'm not going to be involved in it, he said. I raised my hand to assure him of my honorable intentions. I interact a lot with our customers. I interact with them on a daily basis. I know what they pay for our products, and I know the contracts practically inside out, I began to explain to an attentive Robert Williams. How would anyone know that we offer more favorable terms? And with my designs and your team, we can be the best in the game. What do you say? I suggested confidently. He held out his hand, and I shook it. I looked into his eyes and saw that I was looking at a man of integrity. Another part of the plan was accomplished. Now, back to my cheating wife, Holly. We met at Kingston University in South London. She was in her final year of a creative writing degree, and I was completing my master's in mechanical engineering and design. As I said, I was too shy to approach her, and she had never lacked attention from men. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall with brown hair and big brown eyes. She was the kind of woman you could get lost in. She had a beautiful body, but I knew she was beyond me. All the guys that ran after her were outgoing and popular. To my surprise, one of her friends started talking to me at the party, and Holly came over and joined us. I had little experience with women, and I think my modesty and shyness made me attractive to her. I got up the courage to ask her out, and we started dating. After about 6 months of dating, I heard rumors that she was having sex with other guys, but I had no way to prove it, and I was afraid to confront her. Holly was a spoiled child. Her parents spoiled her and her sister Caroline. For most of our relationship, I had to put up with her acting like a princess. If she wasn't doing well, she would make a fuss and wasn't shy about causing trouble in public, which confused me. My friends couldn't stand her and thought I should get rid of her, but I fell in love, and I had never experienced anything like it before. When we graduated, we both got jobs and were able to rent an apartment near Southampton in Hampshire. Her family was from there, and I had long since stopped having anything in common with mine. We married a year later, and the following year Sophie was born, followed by Ava a couple more years later. Holly loved being a mom, and everything between us has been great ever since. I was promoted several times, and 10 years ago I started working for Walker Engineering. Pay raises and bonuses helped us save up for a better house, but like most people in the world, 2008 was a bad year. The economic downturn has meant that many people have lost their jobs. It became harder to get contracts, so we all had to step up our work and work longer hours without getting any extra money. It was during this time, when both girls were in high school, that I realized that Holly was having an affair with some guy from our old university. I was so focused on work that by the time it was over, I never realized who it was, and my best friend Toby thought it was a guy from her class who had moved nearby. I brought it up to her one day, and she just laughed in my face and told me to stop being stupid. But I knew she was lying. Thanks to the fact that I was able to keep my job and a good salary, I was able to buy a nice house. Holly had always demanded that I buy a house to match our status, whatever that meant. But as always, I relented, and we managed to buy a nice detached 5-bed house in Southampton. It was a buyer's market at the time, so we got a good price, although the mortgage was a bit high. The only thing. I did something out of line. I opened a new savings account in my name only. I only put my year-end bonus into it. Since I was the sole breadwinner and in charge of all the finances and banking, I don't think Holly would have known about it, even if I waved the receipts in her face. In retrospect, it turned out to be one of the best things I could have done. I needed protection because I wasn't sure if Holly was planning on leaving me if the old lover ever came back. After that, things went back to normal, and the girls were always my top priority. I encouraged them in their studies and tried to spend a lot of time with them on weekends. In fact, I was the one who took them to dance classes, concerts, and the zoo more times than I can remember. Holly always seemed too busy on her coffee dates with her other spoiled and lazy friends. I rarely socialized with other husbands, but we all seemed nepotistic and subservient to one degree or another. My friends would sing me the Rolling Stones song under my thumb when I had to cancel plans in favor of something Holly wanted to do. Even at work, the guys on the factory floor made comments about my marital status, especially Holly's control over me. It was only a few months ago that everything fell into place. Ava had just left for university, and for the first time in 18 years, Holly and I were alone. Both girls went to our old alma mater, and as I was finishing unpacking Ava's things in the apartment she would be sharing with her sister, she turned to me and asked why I was even with their mother. I was stunned, for she had always been such a quiet girl, like her old father. "Daddy, I heard she's hanging around with Henry Walker at your company," Ava said. I can still remember the tears in her eyes when she spoke. It was news to me, but I wasn't surprised. All these years, I could have investigated her adventures, but I never did, for fear of breaking up the family and having my girls suffer for it and resent me like my sisters resented my father. I let her cuckold me because the alternative did not bear thinking about. I still loved her, but I loved what we had created even more. This news made several impressions on me. First, I realized for the first time that the level of hostility my girls felt toward their mother was much higher than I had imagined. They loved and respected me, but I knew they were disappointed that I hadn't taken a tougher stance toward Holly. Secondly, it made me remember the old feelings I had for the women in my life while growing up and how that contributed to my weaknesses. And finally, I realized that at work, the employees openly talked and laughed at me, and most of all at Henry Walker, who turned out to be the nephew of Jack, the owner of the company, and the man I was cuckolded by. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't take it anymore, especially now that my youngest daughter had found out about how Holly was making fun of me. I knew I had to stand up to her. My heart was racing as I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Holly to come home. When she finally showed up, I found that I couldn't talk anymore. She just looked at me with what I might call apathy and contempt. She didn't say anything to me as she put her bags away in the closets. Finally, I spoke up. "Are you having an affair, Holly?" I asked. She turned to face me, blushing slightly, but answered without hesitation. "I wouldn't call it a novel, darling." I was shocked by her confession and waited silently for her to explain why having sex with another man didn't count as an affair. "You're a wonderful person, Alex. You're a great provider and my best friend, but there are things you can't provide for me, and I'm not ashamed to say I want all of it," she said bluntly and openly. "So, you're cheating on me," I said, discouraged by her brazen approach to infidelity. "Only my body," she said, "not my heart or my mind, Al, which belong to you." My head was spinning, and my stomach was knotted. The sheer audacity of her words made me speechless. "I've never turned you down for sex, Alex, and all I do is explore with a couple of young guys," she admitted. "What?" I shouted. I didn't raise my voice once, and my reaction took her by surprise. She walked around the table and took the seat across from me. "Don't yell at me, Alex," she said, regaining her composure. "You admitted to cheating on me with 2 guys, and I'm supposed to keep quiet," I replied. "I love you, Alex, but this is how it's going to be. Deal with it, or I'll still leave and be with them," she said, giving me both a threat and an ultimatum. I just sat there, looking at her, as her face softened. For a minute, I thought she saw the hurt on my face. "Everyone does it these days, Alex. My girlfriends have had affairs with younger men, and they say it makes for a better marriage," she said. I was shocked. I had a hard time taking it all in. Before, and now Holly was actually trying to justify her cheating by telling me that all her friends were cheating too. As for her opinion that it would make our marriage better, it was dismissive at best. She didn't care about the marriage or me, only the comfort and security I could provide. I spoke again. "So, I can have another woman, is that what you're saying, Holly?" She stared at me for a few seconds, then laughed in my face. I sat in silence as she continued to laugh, trying to pull myself together. "Yes, Alex, come on, be serious. You have trouble talking to women you've known for years. What chance do you have of talking to someone else?" She was blatantly mocking me as she continued to giggle, and I felt embarrassed and ashamed. But she wouldn't give up. "That's the way it's going to be, Alex, so don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife, I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. Don't ruin your life, don't complain about it, and don't do something you'll regret later." She left me at the table, thinking about what had just happened to my life, to my world. She talked so openly about her affairs that I realized she didn't care about me one bit. I didn't care that all her friends were men, but that didn't give her the right to be one. Not only that, but she had the nerve to threaten me. I was angry, very angry. That night, I slept in the spare room. I couldn't be near her. But around midnight, Holly woke me up and asked me why I wasn't going to bed. Was she really that deluded? I thought. I knew she was a spoiled brat, but really, come on, Alex, get over it. That's the way the world works now. You're just acting like an old man, she said. I didn't say anything. I sensed her presence on the landing, peering into the spare room. "Suit yourself, Alex. You'll be back in bed soon. I know it. You don't deny me anything, and you know as well as I do that I'll get my way," she said confidently. In reality, she was right. What had I done in my 22-year relationship that would indicate anything other than my unbridled devotion and willingness to go along with whatever she said and wanted? It was common knowledge that I was on her payroll, and now it was common knowledge among her friends and my coworkers that I was also a cuckold. I didn't sleep a wink, so I decided to go downstairs and watch TV. There was a show on about celebrities who traced their family tree, and while a lot of that flew past me, it got me thinking about my own family. I had no contact with my mother or sisters, but I started to remember my father. I remembered so little about him. Did he have a family? I guess he did. Why had he left, and was it as my mother said, that he had abandoned us before I left for university? I found out from my brother-in-law that my father had died years ago, but my sisters denied knowing. That's when I decided to cut them out of my life. The next day, I was up and out of the house before Holly even showed up in our room. Thoughts of what she'd said to me were still swarming in my head, and I was desperately trying to focus on something more positive to get me through the day. I remembered the TV show from the night before and decided to make some inquiries about my father. The girls didn't need me as much anymore, and my wife was having sex with God knows who, so maybe answering questions about who and what my father was would keep me busy. "Good morning, Alex," I turned to see who was talking and faced Henry Walker. The smug look on his face, as if he were ready to burst into laughter at any moment, made my blood boil. I just stared at him and said nothing. "How's your wife doing?" he asked, openly mocking me. I heard a few giggles from the grown men at the coffee machine. I just stared at them as they stood their ground. I walked past them as they continued to giggle at my expense. I felt like the whole world knew my business, and even my boss's secretary, Olivia, seemed to find my situation laughable and open to ridicule. "Can I offer you anything, Mr. Price? Maybe a couple of balls?" Olivia said, trying to suppress a laugh. "What did you just say?" I asked, looking into her eyes. She stepped from foot to foot and walked over to me. "I told you there were no calls," she said, trying to suppress a laugh. I walked into my office and sat down at my desk. My day had gotten off to the worst possible start, and now I was a laughingstock both at work and at home. I tried my best to focus on my project, but the anger inside of me wouldn't subside. I decided to start looking for my father. All I knew was that he was born in Cambridgeshire and left us at the age of 38 in 1977, so I started looking for family history websites in the area. After a 30-minute search, I found that there were 14 people in Cambridgeshire named James Price, born in 1939. I knew that he might have died a few years before I went to university, so I was able to narrow it down to 3 possible people. I decided I didn't have time to search for each of them, so I posted a message on genealogy websites in each of the towns I found. As I sat in my office reflecting on the past 24 hours, I received a call from my boss, Jack. He wanted to talk to me in his office. Jack was a successful and wealthy man, but in his 60s, he had been married 3 times. He was a cheater and a bully. He was one of those power-crazed types who demanded respect but gave nothing in return. Many times in the past, I had considered leaving, but he always convinced me to stay. And yes, the money was the best around. The only thing I knew about him was that he was having sex with his secretary, Olivia, behind his 3rd wife's back. "It has come to my attention that your wife is playing around with your nephew, Alex," he said sharply. "With your nephew?" "Well, yeah, he's a temper guy. It runs in their family," I snapped back. "But that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't want this to affect the business, and family comes first for me, Alex. So if you get in trouble, you're the one who has to leave the company. Is that understood?" He spoke to me like an old-school teacher punishing a child. I bit my lip as his impatient secretary, Olivia, hovered by the door. She was no doubt gathering information to pass on to her friends at the factory. Turning to leave, I wondered why a young woman like her would stoop to having sex with a dirty old man like Jack Walker. As I walked past her, I heard the giggling again. I lowered my head and walked out as the door closed behind me. As I returned to my office, I realized that being here was not doing me any good. I had paid for my girl's education, and now all I was doing was funding my wife's infidelities. I was a pretty simple person. I liked my gadgets, but I could live without a big house. Most of my living expenses were Holly's indulgences, weekly visits to the hairdresser and manicurist, her car and phone, and other unnecessary luxuries. I was usually happy at work. It was my place to be creative, and I was very successful. I was the one who designed many of the parts that were manufactured and sold here, and I was sure I could find work elsewhere. They just thought I was too weak, and they were right. I was not the confrontational type and never made waves because I was content. I looked at the splash screen with a picture of the family on vacation, clicked my mouse, and my email page opened. Waiting for me was a message from a woman named Jennifer Holmes of the Cambridge Genealogical Committee. I was stunned at how quickly they responded. I clicked the button and read the message. I was stunned. Jennifer read my post asking for information about my father and contacted a woman who claimed to be his niece and had been on the same site many months earlier researching her family tree. Her name was Rachel Murray, and she was my cousin. I sent Jennifer my number and asked if Rachel could contact me. I left work feeling uplifted. As soon as I walked through the door, I could smell dinner cooking. I left my bag in the hallway and walked into the kitchen to find Holly busy cooking. We managed to mutter a greeting, but ate in silence. During dinner, Holly kept trying to make eye contact with me, but apparently she realized I was still angry. Until tonight, I hadn't been able to last a few hours without confusing her or letting her get her way. She broke the ice. "Can we talk about last night, Alex?" she asked meekly. "What's there to talk about? You explained everything perfectly last night. I'll either accept it or I won't, right?" For a few seconds, she looked at me with a look of regret on her face, but it didn't last long. She took a deep breath, cleared her throat, and continued. "You're a great husband, and you've never turned me down for anything. So please, don't turn me down, Alexa," she was almost begging, as she always does to get what she wants. "If I'm so great, why cheat on me? Why make a fool of me?" I asked honestly. She panted and just brushed me off. She had no answer. She was just being selfish, and I was getting more and more tired of it. I couldn't do anything to make her happy anymore. How many hours I work to pay the bills and give her everything she wants, and all I get is disrespect and ridicule. I drive a 12-year-old Range Rover, and she drives a car that is less than 2 years old. Listen, Alex, I have needs, and you just can't fulfill them. So either you can handle it like I know you can, or see me to a younger man. You mean Henry Walker? You could have used his name, Holly. Everyone knows he had sex with you, I interjected. Yes, Henry and I are lovers. He's practically your boss, Alex, and one day he'll take over the company from his uncle, she said bluntly. So, he's giving me what I need in bed right now, and if you don't relent and agree, I'll leave you, and he'll give me everything else I want and need. I didn't say anything, as usual. I just got up from my seat and walked into the office. I really wanted to hit someone or something, but instead, I sank into my chair and screamed into my hands. Tears came to my eyes, and I wanted to be anywhere but here and now. I found a tissue and wiped my eyes when the phone rang. I picked it up and heard an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We talked for about an hour, and when I hung up, everything else went out of my head, and a huge smile appeared on my face. Rachel was thrilled that I had decided to get involved with my father, and she had a lot to tell me. She was talking at 100 miles an hour, and I was having a hard time absorbing everything she was saying. I learned that my mom had actually kicked my dad out of the house and had lied to me my entire childhood. Sadly, he died in 1983 when I was only 11 years old. He died of alcohol poisoning, and his mother, my grandmother, always blamed my mom for his temper and mental state after he left us. Rachel told me that he really wanted to come back into my life, but was prevented from doing so. We arranged to meet up this weekend at her house in Cambridge. I was excited and knew the break would be good for me. The rest of the week dragged on. Everything was the same at home, but at work, I was constantly being laughed at behind my back. Henry and his buddies thought it would be funny to hang a pair of panties on my office door. I looked at Olivia, but she didn't say anything. Inside the panties was a note that said, "Please go back to your wife." I was broken. I sat at my desk that day too and cried. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I was glad when Saturday came. I told Holly I was going to visit a friend in London, and she didn't care what I was doing. I guessed that she would mock me, so her absence made it easier for her. The drive to Cambridge was a stressful one. The M25 highway proved to be a nightmare as usual, and I ended up finding Rachel's house an hour after I was expected. This didn't seem to faze her as I was greeted with the best hug I've had in years. I was introduced to her husband, Greg, and 2 young children, Grace and William. Once the formalities were over, we moved on to talking about my father and my new family. Rachel had such a warm, unselfish personality. She and Greg were interjecting and finishing each other's sentences. I think they both couldn't wait to share our family story. During my stay there, we were joined by David and Lucy Price. He was my cousin and Rachel's brother. We got along very well, and he added everything he knew about my father and family. After lunch, we went on a little trip where I had some time to think. When we got back, David and I talked about work and family life. He could tell things weren't going well, and for some reason, I confided in both of my new cousins. They just told me not to put up with it and that they would support me if I needed anything. I was so grateful to them. I left Cambridge with a new perspective on things. I had been told so many lies and treated so badly throughout my life that realizing I had a completely different family who had shown me more kindness and honesty in one day than most people I had known my whole life gave me hope. I needed to sort my life out and get back to being happy, not just for myself, but for my girls, my friends, and my new family. By the time I got home, it was 8 o'clock in the evening, and Holly was just about to go out. "Where are you going, Holly?" I asked. "Out with friends." "You mean Henry or Max?" I snapped back. She looked at me somewhat taken aback that I knew the name of her other lover. I gave her an understanding look. "Please don't do this again, Alex," she begged, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. "Please, Holly, I'm asking you to stop this and become my wife," I pleaded. "Stop being silly, Alex. I'm your wife and always will be. Don't deny me my pleasures, and I'll make your life easier." "I'll be back by midnight," she said, completely ignoring my wishes and continuing to threaten me. She approached me with her arms wide open, and I turned my back to her. She said nothing to my blatant insult, just picked up her Prada purse and headed for the door. "Holly, as your husband, I'm asking you not to do this." My voice became harsher. She stopped where she was and looked at me as if asking herself who this guy was and what he thought about talking to me like that. It only lasted a second before she burst out laughing. "What are you going to do, Alex? Leave me? You'll never have the courage to do that. We both know you'll always be by my side." I was mortified. I lowered my head as her words echoed in my head. "For me, no balls, deny me my pleasures." I always knew she was a spoiled brat, her parents made sure of that. I knew I treated her like a queen while I was the workhorse. I knew she was selfish, but I always believed she loved me more than anything. I knew I was a fool, and I knew I'd been one for too long. This had to end, and I needed to make plans to make it happen. I wasted no time and got down to business. I actually started when Henry or Max was having sex with her. Maybe they were doing it together. Perhaps that's what she meant when she said she liked getting brownies and eating them. I provided her with security, protection, and material goods while 2 young men had sex with her as they pleased. These thoughts were driving me mad, and I was starting to lose my concentration. I needed to find a way to destroy the last vestiges of my attachment to her, and I think I found it. I found the box I was looking for and the particular picture in it. It was the only picture of my mom and sisters. I didn't think it would work, but I cut Holly's face out of the picture and pasted it next to them. I had no love left for them, and adding Holly's smirking face to the picture might help. I put it on the desk next to the monitor in my office. At about 12:45, I was finishing up work. I had pretty much decided what I was going to do in the near future. I had an idea of when I would be leaving, but it could be in a few weeks. I had time because Holly didn't expect me to leave. It might not work out, and I would definitely need help to pull it all off, but by now, I had convinced myself that I would go all the way. I heard someone stumble out the door, and as I got up to look out the window, I saw Henry Walker's car pull away. I heard her coming up the stairs and quickly erased my story. I would have to use incognito mode in the future. I waited for her to enter our bedroom and walked down the stairs to make myself some coffee. I sat down on the couch and thought about my future away from this place, and honestly, without my daughter's presence, I knew it wouldn't be so bad. I decided to try and move closer to them. Monday morning, I came to work, clearly realizing that I wouldn't lift another finger. Jack Walker could fire me for all I cared. I walked to my office, ignoring the taunts and comments directed at me. I would destroy those bastards, and I knew my anger would get me through this. I managed to get an appointment with the bank for 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I took the time to prepare for it by analyzing my finances. The odds were slim, but if everything worked out and the right people helped me, I would come out of this situation unscathed. The meeting went as planned, and I was able to close my savings account and remove my name from our joint account. I still had an ISA with a few thousand in it, so I closed it for cash and put it in my wallet. On the way to the office, I stopped by the PC World store and bought 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 gigabytes USB 3.0 hard drive, and a new hard drive for my PC. Back in the office, I sat down at my desk and began to see if I could open the company's personal client files. I'd seen a glimpse of them in Jack's office, so I knew they existed, but I needed his password. It didn't take me more than an hour to crack it. Ironically, his wife's name was his username, and the password was his name and 6-digit birthday number, Jack24656. I had everything I needed. I plugged the disk into my computer and loaded all the files onto it. 10 minutes later, I did the same with all my new plans and drawings for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system I was working on to keep this company ahead of the curve. We were creating pumps for air conditioners, heavy equipment, and even the dairy sector. I erased all of my computer history, including all of my plans and all of my designs. Then I shut it down, removed the hard drive, and replaced it with a new one. I put everything in my bag and reinstalled Windows. I spent the rest of the day researching our competitors on my phone. I logged onto the Monster website to look for engineering jobs in the South London area and then left for the day. That evening, after another silent dinner, I went to my office. I discovered that one of our major competitors, going through a financial downturn, was looking for a mechanical engineer to help design and run the shop. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but pretty darn close. They were offering a salary £10,000 less than my current salary, so I sent an email and attached my CV. That night, I decided to sleep in our marital bed, just so I wouldn't disturb Holly. However, I made sure. I was already asleep when she walked in. I felt her rubbing against me, and I felt sick to my stomach. But as sick as it was, it felt good to react that way. She became disgusted with me, and that would help me in the long run. The next day, I received a call from a very surprised Robert Williams of Sutton Hydraulics. We spoke briefly, and he couldn't believe that I would consider leaving Walker Engineering for a small company. He offered me the job almost immediately, but I insisted on an interview the next day. He accepted. Another important screw was put in place, and the wheels started turning very quickly. I had a lot of free time, so I started looking for apartments in the area. I didn't need a house, and although there weren't many options, I managed to find a very nice apartment to rent. It was £1,200 a month with 2 bedrooms and was perfect for me. The apartment was 15 minutes from the girls and 5 minutes from work. I arranged a viewing the day after my interview with Robert Williams was over. I then spoke to Jack and told him that I needed to meet my daughters in Kingston the next day to sign some papers, but he just brushed me off and said go. That night, I called my best friend Toby Brown. We'd known each other since 6th grade. We had both gone to Kingston, but he had studied finance and math. He was now a big banking analyst in the city and lived with his wife and kids in a nice house in Twickenham. Most of all, he and his wife hated Holly, so we rarely spoke to each other as a couple. Holly was jealous of Sarah because she was an ambitious web developer and married to a rich banker. I guess even with everything I was giving her, I still wasn't up to her level. I arranged to meet Toby the next night after the interview and apartment viewing. He knew I had something on my mind, but I told him I'd tell him all about it when we met. Along the way, I thought about many things. Today was important not only for my plan for the near future, but also for my future. At this point, I had no idea how the girls would react. Until the recent revelations, I had planned to retire at 55. I was thinking of investing in a villa in Italy or somewhere else. My mortgage would be paid off when I turned 50, and the extra 5 years of work would allow us to accumulate a nice little fund without relying on a retirement wallet. My new job was about 20 minutes away from the girls' apartment. The meeting went quickly. The apartment was perfect, so I had plenty of time before meeting Toby. I grabbed lunch for me and the girls and headed to their apartment. They lived together, and I was paying half the rent. As I approached the house, I didn't know what I would say to them. I didn't know how often they talked to their mom, but I knew I didn't want to hide anything from them. When they saw me, they ran up and grabbed me as I was already walking through the door. My smile could be seen from space. I missed them both so much. "Daddy! Daddy!" they shouted, laughing as if they were still toddlers. They led me into the house, and I laid out the lunch I had grabbed on the way. We sat and ate while they told me about their lives and schoolwork. I was so proud of my two girls. Sophie had already studied pharmacology for 2 years, and Ava was studying nursing. 2 professions for loving and caring people. I saw Rachel in them and talked at length about our new family, promising that we would all meet soon. When we finished lunch, I took a sip of coffee and wondered. They knew something was going on. "What is it, Daddy?" "Spill it," Sophie said. "Well, you know your mom cheated on me, right?" I said. They both looked at each other, then returned their gaze to me and nodded in unison. "Well, I've had enough, and I've decided I'm going to leave her," I muttered. Everyone's smiles widened. "Good," Ava said. "About time, Daddy," Sophie added. "You're not mad or anything, girls?" I asked timidly. "No, Daddy. For as long as I can remember, she's been a jerk to you," Sophie growled. I thought about reprimanding her for disrespecting her mother, but I didn't. In fact, I thought, good for Sophie. I also felt ashamed again because they had obviously seen this growing up. I hoped they wouldn't follow in their mother's footsteps as far as men were concerned. I hoped I hadn't hurt them in any way because I was too weak and pathetic. I also hoped that I respected them. "What are you going to do, Daddy?" asked Ava. I told them that I had a new job and that I would be moving closer to them. They were thrilled but also surprised that I had actually decided to move away from their cheating mother and had already made plans to do so. For that, I received 2 strong and loving hugs. I told them I would do everything I could to protect my financial future without going into too much detail. When I got up to leave, they said they would support me no matter what, and although they loved their mother, she came second to me, and she always had. I left their apartment full of happiness and was now ready for the next phase of my plan. This was the most important part. Toby and Sarah met a few years after he left university. They are 2 of the nicest people I know, and tonight I would be counting on their favor. I was greeted warmly as usual, but my mind was spinning about what I would be asking of them, and they both knew. I was out of my depth. They wanted to know at once what was going on, and I told them there was no point in beating around the bush. I told them everything that had happened and the first part of my plans. They were more surprised by my resistance than by Holly's infidelity. It was quite commonplace in their eyes. "So why did you dump her now?" Alex asked, Sarah handing me another cup of tea. I declined something stronger since I had to drive home today. I always thought she was cheating on me, but I couldn't prove it. Now she admitted it, and everything fell into place. I also discovered something that made me say I'd had enough. I told them about meeting my cousins and that my mom kicked my dad out of the house and that my sister sided with her. My father was just like me, or rather, I was just like him. But this time, my girls are on my side. So it was this discovery that prompted you to finally stand up for yourself? Asked Toby, worry written all over his face. No. I was taken to my father's grave. I was hesitant at first, but I managed to lay flowers and say a few words. Then I looked at the engraving on the stone, which shocked me. That's when I realized I had to leave, I explained. What was that, Alex? They said in unison. It had a rose on it, and below it was the inscription in memory of him. There was the date of his birth, and below that, the age at which he died. There was silence for a moment before I spoke again. He died at the age of 44, the age I am now. Toby and Sarah recoiled slightly at this news, and I realized they understood. There were times when I could reach for a shot glass like he did or drive myself to suicide like my grandmother thought he was doing. I had a choice, be like him or fight back, I said clearly. I decided that I wasn't going to kill myself anymore by trying to be the perfect husband while being bullied and ridiculed. At that moment, I felt weaker than I had in weeks. Admitting to my friends how down I was harder than I'd realized. Toby had knocked me off my game. What do you want from us, Alex? Please refuse if it's too much, but I have a plan to protect myself and get that jerk down, intervened Sarah. I smiled and nodded. Sarah did seem to have a tough side to her character. When I thought she was having an affair in 2008, I opened a separate savings account and put all my bonuses and all my spare cash into it. I was also lucky that the only way I could get a mortgage loan for the amount we needed was to apply in my name only. Holly had no real employment history, so it was easier for me to apply a loan. I knew that if anyone was capable of following my train of thought, it was Toby. My savings with interest are now worth £60,800. I have £122,000 left on my mortgage, but the house in the next street over from me has sold for over $500,000. Toby, I need you and your connections to get me a short-term loan for the remaining £60,000. I want to pay off the mortgage before I divorce her. When I divorce her? Why bother? It means she can have half, Sarah said. Well, unless you count the £60 odds 000 in savings I'm keeping. She can fight for half of everything anyway. But that's where you come in, I said, pausing for a second. I want you to incorporate a new company. What do you mean, register a new company? Toby interjected. I want to transfer ownership of my house to your new company. That means she won't be able to lay her hands on it. I've looked into it, and if I pay off the mortgage, all I have to do is go to the land registry and transfer the paperwork to your company. Toby and Sarah looked at each other for a moment. Will that work, Alex? I mean, if you divorce her, she'll hire a lawyer and fight for everything. She doesn't have the money for it, and I'm sure her parents won't want to pay such a huge bill if they know their daughter is a cheating adulteress. Plus, I'm hoping to use her opinion of me to my advantage, I said. How? Asked Toby. She thinks I'm a coward who will never leave her, so I won't ask for a divorce until I sell the house. The property becomes cash, and by the time she realizes I'm divorcing her, we can move that money into a lot of different accounts. Toby just smiled at me and said, I never knew you had it in you, Alex. So you're going to help me? I asked. Oh, yes. I'll get right on it. But you know a good lawyer will try to trace the money, don't you? He said. Yes, but it will take a long time, and she won't be able to afford a big legal bill, I replied. After another hour of conversation, I had all the pieces coming together. On the way home, I decided that I wasn't even going to file for divorce. I was sure I wouldn't meet anyone else, let alone remarry, and that way, I would have more time. I figured Holly wouldn't be bothered by my absence for at least a month. At that thought, I laughed to myself. By next week, I'd be gone. When I got home, it was almost 2 in the morning. Here's the corrected version of your text. I looked in on Holly, and she was sound asleep. No remorse is keeping her awake, I thought. I decided to go to the spare room. Thursday morning, I was up and out of the house before Holly even woke up. I wrote my resignation letter in the morning, and around lunchtime, I called Toby. I've got good news, bad news, and then good news again, buddy. Okay, let's go in that order, I said, laughing. The good news is that I have registered the company, he said. The bad news is that to get a loan for the amount you need, you'll need some serious collateral, something like a house, and that won't work for you, I said, frustrated and scratching my head trying to think of something. When Toby continued, listen, Alex, you trust me, and I trust you. I've been talking to Sarah about this, and we've been thinking the same thing. I'll transfer £60,000 into your account right now so you can get on the case. Just give me the money back when you find it, okay? I was stunned. If he could see my face now, he would realize how grateful I was. This is too much, Toby. You've done enough already, I interrupted. Just take the money and go do what you need to do, he said. You have no idea how much this helps me, buddy. I owe you a huge debt of gratitude. Just do it, walk away from this disrespectful, money-grabbing scammer, and be happy. That's all we care about. I gave him my details and ended the call.